Because in Illinois in particular, it's not very clear how these systems should be installed because because there's no clear fire code, like that that would tell us how to do that. All right, can you go to the next slide? Or I can also drive the mouse. Yeah. Yeah. So I work for Jensen Hughes. I don't know if you guys heard about us. We're like the largest fire protection company in the firm in the country. But like, I was actually not really wanted to talk about Jensen Hughes. I'm here like as a private citizen. As I said, I'm an Oak Parker. Just giving you guys some background. We'll review some typical applications, what codes and standards are out there, what the hazards are associated with those systems, what general safety approaches can be taken. These systems need to be tested before they get put in the field. If that test data is available, that's good data for you guys to request and take a look at, so that in case you ever have to respond to an energy storage system fire, like what kind of stuff you would get exposed to. So we will review it. Essentially going to be like a hazmat type of situation. And I should say, like, I'm an engineer by training. I'm not a firefighter. So if I say something that doesn't make any sense, please feel free to correct me and straighten me out. Okay. Then some case studies and some review of recent fires. This is what my company does. We mainly are involved with code and standard consulting and fire, smoke, and explosion control, these type of things. But here, like the typical installations that we currently see in the field, we have building solutions. These are like warehouse type of structures. They can get pretty big, so we can have like hundreds of megawatts of power in there. Then that certainly gets pretty large. We're probably not going to see something like this in Oak Park, but what we're going to see in Oak Park is like residential systems like these. Like this here is a system that's installed in a residence in a basement. Here, like the picture is not super great, but this is like actually a container put on a rooftop in New York City. So these are like colleagues from FDNY inspecting it on the roof. And what you cannot maybe quite see from this here, but where my mouse is there, these are like deflagration vent panels. So we're going to talk about that later, why these are important. Then we have other specialty type of applications, again, like containers on structures like this, containers on roofs. I could see that this is something we might see in Oak Park. There was a push in Boston. There were financial incentives available for hospitals to install these systems. So this is actually like a hospital in Boston that has this installed on the roof. This allows them to get rid of one of their diesels for like emergency power and stuff. And this is how these containers typically look like. They are either walk-in or not, and they're basically full with these IT rack type of structures, full with batteries. What we see more and more, and that's probably highly unlikely for Oak Park because we don't have the space, but you see something like this here, like in Australia or like in Arizona, where you have a lot of sun, like solar plus storage. So we probably don't need to spend much time talking about that. But when you encounter those systems, what's important to know, there are like several companies that manufacture cells. There are much more companies that claim that they have their own systems, but they actually don't. Typically people buy like the batteries from Samsung, LG, CATL, and so on, Panasonic. Tesla also uses a lot of Panasonic, by the way. But I'm telling you guys that because these are like the places that can be contacted to obtain the battery test data from. we'll talk about that in a little bit, but basically these batteries are required to be tested in a full-scale fire test, and they measure what they're going to release. So there's going to be a lot of hydrogen and a lot of other good stuff, you know, that we want to be sensitive to. There are different, yeah, and I should say, like, so this testing is required. If somebody cannot provide this test data, you know, I don't. That's a red flag. You know, like if somebody like would say like, hey, we're going to install a system like this in Oak Park, and they do not have that test data, I don't know how it was permitted in the first place, and maybe they're not as proficient with it as they should be. You know, so like that would definitely be a red flag. There are different. All these companies make different chemistries. There's like nickel, manganese, cobalt, nickel, cobalt, aluminum, lithium, iron, phosphate. These are like the three most popular. What's the most important to note here? These chemistries are non-water reactive. So when you do have to put out a fire at an energy storage system with lithium-ion batteries, you actually can't put water on. Versus like a lithium battery, you maybe don't want to do that. I don't know if you guys, have you heard about like this fire, was it last year in Morris, that big warehouse that burned for like a long time, right? So I think one problem there was, I think at first, like they didn't even know exactly what was in it. And then at some point, you know, they figured out like that there were a lot of like primary, like, so you say, when you say a lithium battery, that is a primary cell, and a lithium ion battery, it's a secondary cell. And secondary or lithium ion means it's rechargeable. And like a lithium, just a stand without the ion is not. That is like your button cell that you have like in a watch or like in a bicycle light or something like this, right? And that is water reactive. So you don't want to put water on that. Lithium ion water is actually probably, you know, like the preferred choice to fight it, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And those batteries, you know, they have different geometries or arrangements, typically cylindrical pouch or prismatic. So how this looks like inside the container or inside a utility closet or something like this, where somebody installs an energy storage system, is like this IT rack type of structure, as I mentioned before, and then you have like these modules. These are like they're the size of like a briefcase or so. They're slotted in there, and in this module you either have like prismatic cells, cylindrical cells, and pouch cells. And you know, you can see the challenge with that if like if let's say like a module in the middle here would overheat and enter like a condition called thermal runaway and start on fire. It is kind of tricky to actually get water on it because it's kind of shielded. So then we can talk about like codes and standards a little bit. Has anybody in the room dealt with energy storage systems, by the way? Not really? Okay. So NFPA 855, have you guys heard about that? Then probably not, right? Okay, so the main takeaway is like what's out there in terms of codes and standards is somewhat sparse, but there now is. The biggest one out there is like NFPA 855. So if somebody is installing a system like that in Oak Park, I would definitely recommend that they are that they do this in compliance with NFPA 855. I understand they could do it by ignoring it because of like we don't have like that regulation yet here or like in Illinois. But that is right now the sort of like the, I don't want to call it gold standard, but a standard, you know, and it's the first release. The second release is going to come out later this year. That tells you how these systems should be protected. There's also UL 9540 that provides a system level certification, and 9540A, like the guys in Northbrook that burn a lot of batteries all day long to characterize what's coming off and how it must be protected. So I think as a takeaway from this here, I think this is definitely what we would like to see. 9540A is the test data. 9540A certifies that the system is safe, and NFPA 855 certifies that it was installed properly, safely. So and then that gives you guys the knowledge. Let's say you would have to respond to something, you'd start talking to like the representative of the system. If they can tell you like, yes, this was NFPA 855 and so on, then okay, that's going to be like an automatic suppression system. That's going to be like, it gives you a bunch of knowledge of what is in place, right? If they answer like, we don't know what NFPA 855 is, that's going to be a problem, I think. And in any case, it's always like a good idea that if a system like this is in place, the owner should have like a subject matter expert, like identified the name, the phone number, and so on, that you guys can call that person during an incident. Otherwise, I would recommend like, take a conservative approach and make sure that you are safe. Yeah, and you can see, like I highlighted here, like that it's not that clear in Illinois when we look at the International Building Code, which understands like Oak Park follows. They did have like some rules in there in the 2018 edition, and then in the 2021 edition, they took it out. That had to do with fire rating of the walls and something like this, and so there's still like a lot of confusion, and so like they pulled out some of the requirements. But in any case, what is now slowly being consistently said is that an HMA, or like a hazard mitigation analysis, should be completed. And if like the installation was done according to NFPA 855, this would have definitely been done. So like before a system gets installed, somebody who is considered a subject matter expert should take a look at it and go through this exercise of an HMA, identify what are the threats, what are the barriers, what are the consequences. The consequences are really important for you guys, and then like an emergency response plan can be drafted of that, or like a pre-fire plan, I think. So enough standard talk. I thought this was just like important that you guys have that information, in writing, and what you can ask for. But here's like the main hazard. It's thermal runaway. Are you guys familiar generally what that is, thermal runaway? Okay, because it's not isolated like to like batteries. It's basically, when we have like basically unintended chemistry going on, like you guys. Now I'm comparing apples to oranges. It's not a thermal runaway, but you see like when kids like throw the Mentos in the Coke Light bottles, and like that's like a gas generating chemical reaction, right? A thermal runaway essentially generates tons of heat. It's an exponential, it's an exothermic chemical reaction. Once this is going on, you're not going to do anything about it. Like it basically needs to finish. It's like it's again apples to oranges, compared to nuclear meltdown, on a small scale. But that's basically what happens to a lithium-ion battery. What's initiating it is basically there could be a lingering manufacturing defect. There could be an overcharging scenario. That's why it's important in an installation that good batteries are being used, but that the auxiliary equipment is also good, because if, like, let's say the charger is like some cheap device, like that keeps charging the batteries, at some point that thing is gonna not like that anymore. And overheating and the mechanical abuse. Mechanical abuse typically, you know, we have these issues in California, for example, where like you have earthquakes, you know, like on a regular basis, you know, not so much here, but who knows, you know, if like a system like this gets installed like close to the L tracks, you know, there is a little bit of seismic activity. But all these initiating events have in common that they result in an internal short circuit of the lithium-ion battery. So the lithium-ion battery cell short circuits, there's a separator in the middle, and you got like some stuff here, you got some stuff there, the separator breaks down, the components they mix, and then, you know, you'll generate a lot of heat very quickly. Then the cell is going to rip open, like shown in the picture here, catch on fire, maybe not. You know, sometimes it does catch on fire, sometimes it doesn't. It just gets really hot. And like the jet of white stuff you see that's coming out here, that's basically the electrolyte in the reacting with the humidity in the air. So it's like a white-looking kind of fog. And if you see that, you know, you wanna like stay away from that, because, you know, like there's typically like hydrogen fluoride and that kind of stuff in it, you know. So, you know, as I mentioned, like it's definitely going to be like a hazmat incident if you're responding to an energy storage system fire. So I don't know exactly what kind of protective gear you have, but, you know, you want to make sure that, you know, you put that on. And it's the interesting thing is, right, if you like review like an SDS for like a lithium-ion battery, it's not going to list hydrogen fluoride, because that is like a product of the combustion that's going on, right? So that's why, like, you know, looking at the SDS, it's one thing to do, but knowing what's happening during thermal runaway is the other one. And so here's like, you know, the chemistry that's typically coming out in the gas. And it's basically carbon monoxide, hydrogen, carbon dioxide, and a bunch of hydrocarbons, plus the nasty stuff, the toxic stuff. You know, you can use this table to sort of estimate how much you're going to get out of it. But here's like an important comment I just want to make. These cells, they generate tons of gas in thermal runaway. So if you have a single cell on the order, let's say, of like 100 amp hours or so, it'll knock out like 200 liters. You know, that's the European in me talking. So, you know, because I'm talking liters, but 200 liters is basically an oil barrel, right? It's a 55-gallon drum. One cell would fill up an oil barrel with hydrogen. So if you have an installation like this in a utility closet, you're inside a building and you're responding to it, and you see white smoke, you know, like, oh, at least one cell went into thermal runaway, you could have 200 liters of hydrogen behind that door. You know, so like, and I want to be very, clear about that, because up to this point here, I talked about like the toxicity aspect, but there's an explosion concern, or like a deflagration concern that we're having. And you know, we're gonna see that in a little bit. And basically, the bigger the cell, you know, the more hydrogen and flammable gas is being released. That stuff is typically a cocktail with, you know, we see here, like this table was done like, they tested 21 different batteries or so. And they said like, hey, that the lower flammability limit is typically 10. In my projects, I've actually been seeing more like that the lower flammability limit on average is like more like 6. So even less than that, you know, so we have like, you know, you guys do the math, you know, how big the room needs to be in order to like dilute that down. But if it's a tight closet and you have like the oil drum of flammable gas released in it, you know, it's flammable, explosible, and that's basically you know, what would happen. So like this is an example for these containerized systems. And you know, like this is like some research that was done, and they must have been a fun project, you know, like they blew up a bunch of like those ISO shipping containers that are like being used for energy storage systems. But like what you see in the top row, that is pretty much like on the top two row. No, hold on. The top row, that is a response with no explosion or deflagration venting in place, you know. And you know, in the second row, they have some deflagration vents in the ceiling, and then in the bottom row, they basically have like deflagration vents on the entire ceiling of the container. I have like a bunch of videos of this and like also the test report. What's interesting, at some point, you know, like they're like really launching stuff, so the door flies off and like, you know, and internals go flying. So that's why that's also like something, you know, you need to be sensitive to. You know, I think you should really never like approach the thing until like the subject matter expert is either there or on the phone from the operator, from the owner. But you know, you want to be sensitive to like, hey, am I standing in front of a door here? You know, stand where things can't fly at you. You know, and again, you know, this actually happened. So have you guys heard about like the McNicken incident in 2019? Okay, so like if you Google that, if you're interested in it, there's actually there's some podcast on the internet for firefighters. Now I forgot the name, of course, of it, but it's really interesting. They interviewed the crews that responded to this. It's like 2 45-minute episodes, and they're kind of cool to listen to, you know. So, you know, I would recommend that. So you would need to search for it, or like you know, if I find it, I'll send Bob the link. There's also like a report on this incident, which is free. You know, if you Google this, you'll find that report right away. But what has happened here is they put the power utility put this system out in the field. It's a little bit bigger than a container. It's like a modular type of building, and you know, loaded up with batteries. You know, used it as I think as a peak shaving unit, meaning like they charged up at night when nobody needed the power. You know, and in the morning when people needed power, they opened this up to the grid, and then everybody saves some money on the power bill, and you know, they make some money. That's the whole business idea about it. But so suddenly there's smoke coming out of the thing, and nobody knows what's going on. And I understand that the operator did not notify the fire service. They first went out themselves and thought, what's going on? Then somebody drove by and saw smoke coming out of the thing. Somebody, you know, driving to work or whatever, who decided then to call the fire department. So the fire department rolled out, they showed up there, and they'd never seen it, they didn't know what it was. So what then happened is basically by the end of the day, they decided to make an entry. They opened this door here, what you can see there, and it caused 20 seconds later, it caused a deflagration. So there's a bunch of fire that came out of that door, about like 75 feet jet flame. Good news is like everybody lived, but I understand like the two firemen were like injured pretty badly in this. What basically happened here is there was no water suppression installed. There was a gas gear suppression system installed. Batteries went into thermal runaways. This was detected. The agent dumped, suppressed all the flames. And we think like, hey, that's a good thing, right? No fire. But thermal runaway continued, and it basically went through all these modules that we looked at this IT rec, because stuff gets so hot. If one is going, then the one above is going at some point, and then the one above that is going. And so more and more and more batteries went into thermal runaway, and more of those 200-liter releases were being dumped in the room. So basically, this building was like at a very fuel-rich concentration. There was a lot of flammable gas in it when the door was opened. You have the backdraft, and there's so much hot stuff in it. So like there's going to be an ignition source in it, because of all the electrical equipment and all that kind of stuff, and that then lit it up. So it was a really unfortunate event. But then there were a bunch of investigations going on, and here like some recommendations that came out of it. Basically, the number one, and that's from the Firefighter Research Institute, that stated that they said like, hey, firefighter training, needs to emphasize energy storage system safety. I guess that's why I'm here, and I hope you guys get more training on it as more systems will be installed in Oak Park. You need to know, what is it? What am I getting into? Like I think one of the problem is like as people and consumers, we have been desensitized to like what can go wrong with the lithium-ion batteries. I have to say they are pretty safe. I'm not concerned about my laptop catching on fire right now. We all have like carry our phone like in our butt pockets and our jeans or whatever. No concerns there, right? But the moment is these installations are bigger, even in the residential system is just bigger. You can have like a large number of cells in one place, and then probability becomes higher that there's an issue. Safety tactics should be based on full-scale testing. Now it makes sense what I mentioned earlier, in case you guys were wondering, why is the guy telling us we should request the test data, or somebody from the village should when they permit the system. It'll tell you like what the explosion potential is. It'll tell you what the potential for toxic release is, and so on. If tactics are unclear, again, if somebody like puts a system here in our neighborhood without being in compliance with those standards, define a conservative, have stand back distance essentially, and wait for like the subject matter expert to show up. Remote monitoring, that is actually not required right now, but that is something that is highly recommended. It's actually, the cost is quite cheap if like the installer would just like install like a like a flammable gas monitor there that can be read out remotely, right? So that you guys kind of know like, well, we know what the concentration is in there. And then emergency response planning. It's often forgotten. These systems get installed, and the assumption is nothing can ever go wrong with it. The assumption should be, okay, the system is nothing is probably going to happen, but if something happens, we're going to have really high consequences potentially. It's like one of those low probability, high consequence type of scenarios. That's why you want that emergency response plan. You guys should have a copy of it. For every system I think that gets installed, you guys should at least get a call. Hey, we installed it. You guys want to come out, take a look at it? So that like, I think in an ideal case, you have seen the system before. It shouldn't be your first look at the system when it's on fire. And I don't know, maybe, people do this around here, right? I don't know. We don't really have much industry in Oak Park, but I would hope that, like the companies that have hazardous operations going on, that they invite you guys out once a year or something like this and just show you around, that you know what you're getting into. And explosion protection. This is now actually NFPA 855 was being like amended on an emergency basis. The industry has realized now too much stuff is going on. We're going to make an amendment to the standard, and explosion protection is required for all energy storage systems. Here, just like some pictures, I want to show you guys from from like this incident here, when the fire department responded, and that's what I mentioned. This is this white type of fog or smoke which they encountered. And luckily, you know, they were suspicious and pulled out their gas monitors right away and did some like measurements, and I saw like, whoa, you know, there's a lot of like nasty stuff in the air, and they basically defined like a no-go area and just like monitored the installation for a few hours before they made that entry. But this is how that could potentially look like. Back to standards real quick is what they should have, you know, they should have smoke and fire detection, they should have fire control and suppression. As I mentioned, like clean agent systems are not like Novak, FM200, these type of things. They do a great job like extinguishing flames. They're not going to help cooling a battery. That's in thermal runaway. That's why you got to put water on it. You know, so NFPA 855 recommends sprinkler density of 0.3. New York City requires a sprinkler density of 0.5. So it's a lot of water. You know, why am I telling you guys what New York FDNY does? I think they are like a little bit ahead. Like they put now like in all these new high rises, energy storage systems go on all these. And there's actually, you can also obtain it when you Google it. Like FDNY they have their own standards, like called Rule 608. It's pretty good. You know, that provides you with some background. Explosion control is required either with like a fan that would basically pull out the flammable gases once flammable gases are being detected, or deflagration venting, you know, like those panels that blow open. I think deflagration vent panels are like a fine option if the system is not inside a building, maybe in a container, because we kind of have a pretty good idea what the integrity of a container is, so we can like size those panels accordingly and stuff. But a building doesn't take pressure well, right? Like you put like a half PSI on a door, it'll blow the door out, you know. So like, and so I think on a building you would need like an exhaust ventilation system. And you know, they gotta be, I think that's probably not an issue in Oak Park. You know, I think we have like hydrants all over the place, you know, like water supply. Here, just like to give you like some size examples. So this is like one of those residential systems that we actually might see. This is an LG system. This is 10 kilowatt hours. Because it is 10 kilowatt hours, they're flying below the radar with that, and they don't prescriptively need to be in compliance with any of those standards I was talking about, you know. Which personally I think is a little bit of a flaw, because if you have large cells in that system and only one cell goes, you can still generate a lot of flammable gas, you know. So my opinion is like we should really limit like the cell size for residential applications. And then those racks, you know, they're about the size of a fridge, just to give you an idea. But like you need to know like, hey, how much electrical stored energy is there, you know. Like this guy is about 20 kilowatt hours, and then like, you know, this guy, you know, is about 100 or something like this, you know. And in terms of like fire size, you know, you typically get like 6 to 10 times the thermal energy out of it what you have stored electrically. All right, so this is a little bit repetitive here, so I'm just going to jump into the next point here. Very briefly talk about the testing. You know, this would be more important for like the village hall people who would potentially like permit a system like this, but like this full-scale fire test I was talking about basically is being done in 4 levels. On the cell level, you know, like the pouches or like the little cylinders, the module, the briefcases, the unit, the IT rack, and then the installation, the whole product. And these tests, they measure different things like the LFL, gas composition, gas generation rate, all these things. How much gas can we expect? You know, so that's why this is important. You know, and you can maybe just keep this as a cheat sheet to have it. And now, like, it gets like a little bit more interesting. So we talked a little bit about thermal runaway, and I have a little video here for you guys. And yeah, I'm gonna turn this. That's like a really annoying song they put on it. But turn this off. But so I got this actually from the Austrian Firefighter Association. They do some pretty cool stuff. But what's here? That's what's going on in this video. So like they basically take a lithium-ion battery cell and they short circuit it from mechanical abuse. So I probably just like jammed a nail in it or something, and take the thing and throw it in a bucket. And now, you know, we'll watch what happens. And so first we saw a bunch of white smoke, right? You know, like bad electrolyte, you know, possibly like toxic gases and stuff. And as things going on, at some point, the thing catches fire. And pretty nice flare, right? And I think that that underlines what I was mentioning earlier. The gas generation rate from those batteries, they will not. It's not a short puff, you know. Like, I mean, they will produce gas for a while, you know. So this is like one battery in there. Now this guy shows up and puts water on it. And now we would think, you know, okay, that should do the trick. Right now, like the thing is like fully covered with water. Now they tell us like, hey, top it off. Goes back, tops it off, a little more. Calibrated Austrian trash can, right? But now when you look at, you know, you see it when you look at the bubble, it's bubbling. When you look at the infrared, there's still a lot of heat coming out of it. You know, how can that be, right? Water boils at 100 Celsius. What is that in Fahrenheit? 12? Yeah. All right. So how is it hotter than that, right? So lithium-ion batteries, they generate their own oxygen when they're thermal runaway. So what's happening? Thermal runaway continues to go on underwater, and basically these bubbles, they're basically on fire underwater, and then they pop through the surface. So, you know, you still have, you know, so basically you have fire coming from the water surface. And you know, this is a good example, just like to realize how much heat is being generated in a thermal runaway. You know, this water was being saturated very quickly, and normally, like, it looks like that's a 5-gallon bucket. Normally, you can take up a lot of heat with like 5 gallons of water, yeah. And so that's why we need the flow, the constant flow of water. You know, this is why we are like requiring those high sprinkler densities. So I hope that made sense. All right, this is a test being done that was done by FM Global, and they set like a rack on fire, and that is like kind of like something that you could maybe see. I've seen it before, that like new building goes up. You know, I think we're building right now like a bunch of net zero buildings in Oak Park, that there's maybe like, you know, utility closet has a couple of those racks in it. Thermal runaway happens, and what they did here is they overheated it with you know, here where the cables go on the bottom. I think they had like film heaters or heating pads jammed in there, and they just like overheated batteries until they go into thermal runaway. No mitigation measures installed. They just want to let the thing burn and see what it does. I can fast forward a little bit. I think at some point the video actually fast forwards itself. But you see again like that white smoke and fog rising, so like that tells us like a battery has ripped open, electrolyte is spilling out, is reacting with the air. We can see there's a little bit of fire going on. Now like the smoke detector should definitely fix this up, so like now like everybody's informed. You guys are rolling, and it goes like actually like I see like they're now like fast forwarding themselves. But this is how this would be progressing unmitigated. So this is 10 minutes in, and what we see, what's consistent with this, what we see is like that there's typically a lot of smoke being generated. So there's a lot of flammable gas being generated. But if that gas catches on fire, there is a lot of smoke being generated. So like you definitely gonna encounter a bunch of smoke. And so that gives you an idea about the fire size. That's now like 15 minutes in. They measured the fire size at about 10 megawatts. They do the same test with a sprinkler system on the top, and they can control the fire to about like 7 or 8 megawatts. And they drizzle a lot of water on it. What that does, you make sure that the fire doesn't spread, but you're not going to put out that battery. As I mentioned, like it's a thermal runaway. That battery will have to finish its burn. And here is another quick test I wanted to show. Here's a overcharge the batteries. This could be a common failure mode. And they actually have four batteries sandwiched, on top of each other. They overcharge the bottom one. So it goes into thermal runaway. Flammable gas comes out, catches on fire, and after a while, because it's still so hot, the battery cell above it goes. And Akku is a German word for like rechargeable battery. So. So what's going to happen? Like that was the second one that went. You see, like bam, is like our electrolyte vapor again. The third one goes, and the fourth one goes. So basically, it's going through there at about like maybe like 30 to 60 seconds, one after the next. So now they repeat that same test, and they use pretty small batteries. So they repeat the same test, and they installed like an aerosol generator on the ceiling there, like something like a StatX or something like that. And you see like what it does a really good job in extinguishing the flame. There's no more fire. 1 minute later here, the next cell goes through a little bit of flame, but like the aerosol does a really good job, right? And we got 2 more to go. But the takeaway from this is the thermal runaway continues to go. So like what the suppression system does, it helps us to kill all the flames, but it doesn't stop the thermal runaway. Again, you're not going to stop it. You can just like control it, make sure it doesn't spread. It doesn't propagate to like adjacent racks. And what's another really important takeaway here is, what are we going to do with all that flammable gas now? Right? Imagine the situation. This is a battery system, again, inside somebody's home, or like, like a building, whatever, utility closet. They thought, oh, we're going to install like a sort of like a clean agent or like an aerosol suppression system, and that'll take care of all fire concerns. Yes, no, no flame, but now like as the agent decays over time and loses effectiveness, you still have a room now full with flammable gas to deal with. So that underlines the importance. If somebody puts it in the building, it got to be an exhaust system. Like that's or like I don't know who wants to be the guy who opens that door. So it's. Alrighty, here's just like a couple. Here's just a couple of case studies. This is like a system that went into New York City that I helped with. It didn't have like these safety features. So what we put on here, so it was basically a container with batteries in it. And sort of like, well, that's not safe enough. And the client is a really good one. They kind of said like, yeah, we want to do the right thing. So we put deflagration vents on the ceiling. So in case there would ever be like an explosion, it can be vented, and it can be vented upwards, not at somebody, just like send the fireball in the sky. They have like a fire department connection in safe distance. You kind of don't want to have this in line with that door, even though we have like deflagration vents on the ceiling, right? We kind of like, maybe the engineer screwed up and they didn't size them, correctly, and that door still comes at somebody. So you will kind of want to have like maybe like the fire department connection perpendicular, to like that longitudinal line. And then they also had an exhaust system on it with switches here for fire department use. That if you would show up there, that's a pretty cool installation here. You can first like flip all those switches, just like say like, hey, for the next hour, I'm not going to do anything. We're just going to make sure that like all like the flammable gases are being pulled out. If something happens in the meantime, we have deflagration vents installed. That's another one that went out. And very typical. What's interesting in this market, you have companies that make the battery systems, and then you make companies that make the housing, and they don't necessarily talk to each other, right? And now like the battery people, they say like, hey, we want to install this energy storage system in Oak Park, and we have like the batteries. Oh, we need to buy a housing, and the housing company kind of says, well, here's a housing, has smoke detectors on it, and FM200. That's pretty much like the standard, always works, So like, here, buy this, you're good to go. Like what we just saw, like like we need to question that, and then like there's a modification that can be made to it, to just like put like an exhaust deck on it, intake louvers, and give you guys the power to operate that. What's really important is that the sequence of operation is tuned for the hazard, so that like there are maybe some cases where so that everybody understands how it works. It's like more bells and whistles is not necessarily better. We want to make sure that they all interact appropriately with each other. I'm going to show you like a couple more pictures, and then we can wrap it up. But here, like this is a cool before and after picture. So this happened, already 2 years ago. In Liverpool, they put the system out there. If it's a 53-foot container. Do we have any substations in Oak Park, by the way?
Right next door.
Right next door.
Okay.
Kind of small.
Okay, so they like to put those containers next to substations. Then it's very efficient to be used for peak shaving. In Europe, they don't have prescriptive requirements. It all comes down to what the subject matter expert says. In this example, the subject matter expert thought that like explosion control measures didn't need to be in place there, so they didn't have them. And then they have like 4 AC units on the roof here, as you can see in the before picture, so like now like the AC units became the deflagration panels, like they're now lying here on the left of it, they were launched. I don't know like how high they lofted. I can't imagine like that much, but they launched the doors, so on both sides. They were luckily caught by the fence. Here's one in that happened a month after Morris in LaSalle, and I think there was like Seneca out there, Marseille. I think they also responded to Morris, but different scenarios, right? Here in LaSalle, you can put water on it. In Morris, you couldn't. But here, like, I kind of just wanted to show this to you guys in case my talk has been too scary. You know, sometimes it can also just look like this. It's a pretty small fire. And, you know, the ironic thing here is with energy storage systems that are like highly packed and like in tight containers and whatever, fire is maybe not a bad thing as it burns off all the flammable gases, right? Because I really freaked out about explosions with those systems, you know. So there's fire, the explosion likelihood is very low. If you respond to one of those and you don't see flames, like, ooh, really want to worry, you worry about explosions. Here's another example from Germany. I wonder why. This is like they repurposed the building. They put a bunch of those containers in an old airplane hangar. I just wanted to show this for like the significant smoke generation that was going on there. They actually decided to pull one of those containers out with a front loader because the fire was getting like, it was on fire because like the building was about, you know, like they started to see cracks in the walls. There was like too much heat generation and like they were really concerned about that. So they pulled it out while it was going and then put water on it. You know, here is a site like how we will not see it in Oak Park, but like it's like you've maybe seen it on the news. This is like this big Tesla site in Australia. You know, they're installing a lot of those systems to just get you an idea like what the fire size could be. This system was designed to contain a fire, so it did not. So like also sometimes like, you know, like we kind of like don't necessarily need to believe the label. And you know, the test data attested like kind of like, yeah, this will not propagate, but it did. Here is a dedicated 3-story building in South Korea that they loaded up with a lot of batteries. So like you have a lot of like energy density, a lot of power stored in one place, you know. And once this thing started, you know, they pretty much all they could do is like they could put water on it to just make sure like that it just doesn't spread to the surroundings, you know. But that was a total loss. To give you like an idea, couple of examples here, real quick. Residential systems, you know, we see them in California quite a bit. We see them more in the Chicago area now. In Europe, we see them quite a bit. Here's an example from this year where this little system here, they pulled it out, went into thermal runaway, generated a bunch of gas. This was installed in a utility closet. I assume, whereas you also had a furnace and all kind of stuff. So like there was at some point the gas found an ignition source. And in Germany, most houses are like a cinder block construction. So like, you know, they are like pretty strong. So the weak spot is the roof, so it lifted the roof. So to give you an idea, like blew out all the doors and windows and lifted the roof. Now this is like a different animal here. This is a fairy fire in Norway. I just wanted to show you guys this, that it is maybe somewhat comparable to a residence if you could like respond to bunch of tight spaces. They had to go in there. Same story. Lots of gas generated. Explosion concern occurred. But what point I wanted to make, there's like a picture of the face mask of one of the firefighters, you can see like after they got back, like, I don't know how normal this is, like that you guys get this type of etching on the face shield, but it's like pretty acidic stuff, and they did, I think it says it here. So I'm not kidding, it says it here in the bottom, like it's 12 firefighters had to go to spend 24 hours in the hospital because of like toxic gas exposure. If you guys are now like really interested to read more about this, there's a database that I support. It's being maintained by APRI, the Electrical Power Research Institute. There's the URL down here, so you can visit this occasionally. And every time when there was like an exciting energy storage system fire, we'll put that in there. And then you can, there's typically a news link, and you can take a look. And this screenshot is not up to date, but when you take a look here, it's all like 2020, 2022, 2021. It's all like I say, like we'll have it in the US on a monthly basis, but we'll track it internationally. All right. So now I'm going to wrap this up. All right, how do I do this? To just give you an idea about probability, what we know from this database, and you kind of know like how many systems are installed, and we can just estimate how many fail, because a lot of failures do not get reported, and we miss those, right? But then you can come up with a probability. And when we did this exercise last year, and we had 4 years of data, we found that about 1% to 2% of systems had failed. So that's quite high, so it's higher than we want it to be. And again, it probably has to do with, because we have so many battery cells in one spot. You want to maintain strict operational limits. Everybody should know there should be a pre-fire plan. Would be great if you guys get to see a system before it gets put into service, and you know what you're getting into in case you have to respond. Cell failure should be planned for. Like a lot of OEMs, they say like, well, all batteries, they don't burn, they never catch fire, they're super safe. It's like, yeah, I know, like you can make like 10 million and have only one bad apple in it. But, again, we came up with this 1% to 2% of failure rate. Early detection, alarm management is important. Coordination, planning, communications, again, emergency response plan, hazard mitigation analysis should all be in place. I showed you more of the extreme examples here. The magnitude can definitely range from mild to severe of what might happen, but plan for the worst. There's not really a silver bullet. It really depends on like, hey, what are the surroundings? One of the architects I talked to downtown, where I've been volunteering my time and just like knocking on the doors at the big architectural companies downtown that are building now these net zero buildings, because they sometimes don't know that there is a hazard associated with those batteries. And I keep telling them, hey, there's no silver bullet, depending on where your installation is, where it is in the building, what is outside of the building, you might want to protect it differently. And the guy's just like, well, I understood. I said like, yeah, as long as you just like, one example would be, don't put it in a utility closet that shares a wall with a daycare in the same building. And he asked like, well, what did you just say? It's like, oh, like, and he started taking notes, and they were actually like working on a net zero building that had kind of like a social room or something like this in it, and they were going to put the battery system like, behind the drywall next to it, So explosions, definitely a concern. For you guys, 2 rule of thumbs. Fire burns flammable gases. So if we do see fire, the explosion potential is reduced. But if we have combustion, we typically have more nasty stuff. You know, just be aware of it. HF is a real thing with those batteries. No fire is present, you know, assume that an explosion might occur. That's pretty much it, you know, bring a lot of water, put the water on it, and that's pretty much all I had. If you guys have any questions, you know, I'd be happy to.
I get one. We're talking about the larger, we kind of talked a little bit about all those, like, you know, like the Tesla Powerwalls or those generate little batteries.
Yeah.
I mean, those still have all this same, just a smaller scale, but if it's in like a residential house in your basement.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if they mounted one in your basement wall, right, that's a bad.
Yeah, I don't think that's a good idea. You know, it might be allowed, but it basically comes down to the cell size. You know, one rule of thumb I didn't say earlier was the amount, like the volume of flammable gas generated in thermal runaway correlates with the size of the cell. And like the size of the cell is typically measured like in amp hours. And the correlation is a factor of 2. So basically for a 100 amp hour cell would generate 200 liters. That's the oil drum again, right. You know, of flammable gas. So yeah, so I know like that some of those, you know, Powerwall products and stuff, they use 100 amp hour cells.
Okay.
You know, so then it's like, you know, it's one of those cell
I'll just
goes
say
bad.
at home, I know I never put one of those in.
Yeah.
It's sitting like in his garage.
Yeah, I think.
Oh,
I think those. I mean, you know, honestly, like, I mean, if I would be approached by ComEd or something, I think I sometimes get commercials from them. Hey, can we put one of those in on your property? I would be intrigued, but I would be against putting it inside my house. You know, I think wall mounted outside at the garage. Inside the garage, there's one picture I didn't show you guys. Garage doors make great deflagration vent panels.
Yeah. Well, it is inside the garage.
Yeah. So like understood, you know, and but like those wall mounted system are typically designed.
It's like one of the Generac ones.
For wind and weather, you know, from that perspective, I would put them outside. But there was a case last year in Toronto. It was actually not caused by an energy storage system. It was caused by a Hyundai Kona. Do you guys know that little compact car, Hyundai Kona? They make that as an EV. They use LG batteries in it, the same batteries as you would have in an LG energy storage system. That thing had a bad day inside of the garage, generated a lot of gas, and then the garage door ended up on the neighbor's front lawn on the other side of the street.
Jeez.
I have a question on the residential ones. Is there any sort of like safety in those, like if the cells, like is there a heat detector or anything if they overheat, that kind of like in your house, if you have like a breaker go, it shuts it off? That way there's no power going to that cell anymore, or is that not really a piece?
Yeah, so like the newer system, what they have on board is like, it's called like a BMS, like a battery management system. And that is supposed to keep all the batteries, all the cells in balance. Because what happens in the old days, you know, they would just like say like charge on, discharge on, you know, and like drive them all as one, but like the different cells, they would age differently. And sometimes, you know, like the one cell would be already at 100% state of charge and the other one still needed a little bit of juice. And then you would bring this up to 100% and you would push the one that was already full, and that's dangerous. So they now have like battery management systems.
O5, sick person, 1025 Pleasant Place, Unit 160, ambulance 611.
So they have now battery management systems installed on it that is supposed to maintain everything within safe limits. But it's an active system. It's a system that requires power and needs to actively work to make sure everything is. But that's on there, yeah. And then there's the battery cells themselves. They have like what's called an overcurrent protection device. in case they would swell up too much. It's basically like a scored contact. It's not a rupture disk, but like something in a way, the contact would break, but when that contact breaks, the cell is already in thermal runaway, you know, so.
So there's nothing like before it reaches that point to shut things down from preventing that.
Yeah, not really like that. I mean, that they're trying to make it better. There's a good battery management system could maybe help you with like if the charger, that has happened before where the charger is just like stuck in charging mode, you know, and at some point it puts like a lot of juice on the batteries and the BMS is just like, well, enough, you know, I'm just gonna kill this. It'll save the day doing that, you know, but if like there's a physical breakdown in the cell, you know, like it's a great thing like
that. In some of the residential ones that used to be going in, and obviously will probably be having more frequently here in Oak Park.
I assume so. Yeah.
Are they mostly keeping them outside, or do you see it just depends on who's installing it, or?
It's so and so, you know, like there's one installation in Oak Park I'm aware of that is inside. I'm actually not aware of a lot of installations in Oak Park yet. You know, it's as I mentioned earlier, I think like on the East Coast and on the West Coast, it seems like California's pushing it, you know, like there's financial incentives. New York City is a really hot market. We are catching up here now, but this market is going very fast. I expect that by the end of this year, every new high-rise in Chicago is going to have one of those, you know, it's and then like it'll come here in the suburbs, and you know, every time the net zero label is on it, it probably has batteries installed. And sometimes in new buildings, you know, the architects, they don't necessarily like the aesthetics, right? Kind of like, well, we don't want a container outside on this beautiful facade, you know, I'll put it inside, you know, next to, you know, that's
Parking garage, is that like another location that they might put them into?
yeah. So like basically like top deck of parking garages, that's popular. Also, there are now companies out there that make, as more people buy electric vehicles, there's higher demand for charging stations in parking garages. But if you are like, right, if you're not next to a substation like we here, you know, like you might not have the power infrastructure there. So like what you can do is put a battery in the parking garage that provides charging to cars during the day and charges itself at night, you know. So we've been seeing that a bunch, and there have been some incidences, and I think we're still like figuring this out, what to do here. A lot of the European countries, they were very impulsive with that. They had the first fire incidences, and they say like, we're not going to allow batteries and electric charging inside parking garages until there's more like regulation. Hold it up. But yeah, so as I mentioned earlier,
Lucky's like, great. Thermal overload. You park it inside.
as I mentioned earlier, I live in Oak Park, you know, so like I'm like I kind of like this sort of opportunity here came up spontaneously. I'm glad like Susan connected me with Bob, and just to give you guys like some like background, some intro to the hazard. You know, that was probably pretty quick what I told you guys and stuff. But if you have any follow-up questions, you know, you can always feel free to, you know, here's my contact information on it. You can reach out to me, and in case anything you know happens, whatever, you know, and I said like they should have, you know, the responsible thing is when you install one of those things that you have a subject matter expert on call, you know. But in case you have any issues, you know, you can always feel free to reach out to me. You know, my cell phone number is there, so always happy to help, you know. These are my 3 kids, and that's, I don't know, there's somebody, who drove this in the parade this year?
Tim Seeley.
All righty.
Thank you for coming out. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't know.
Oh, is it? No.